Excluded from my brother's wedding, I went on vacation. It's just a wedding. Stop being dramatic, my mother sighed. When the wedding fell apart, my whole family frantically tried to reach me. I'm Nathan, I'm 42, and I was uninvited from my own brother's wedding via text message. Before I tell you how that one casual, brutal message triggered a chain reaction that completely demolished my family's carefully constructed fantasy, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can reach. So let's get into it. The text. It's astonishing, really, how your entire world can be tilted off its axis by a handful of pixels on a glowing screen. I was at my desk in my home office doing what I always do, working. I was deep into a complex code review for Innovatech, the company I had poured my life into. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and unremarkable outside, the city humming its usual tune. The buzz from my phone was just part of that background noise. I glanced over, saw it was from my brother, Alex, and a small smile touched my lips. He and his fiancée, Brianna, had been a whirlwind of last-minute wedding chaos. I figured it was another frantic query about the caterer's payment schedule or a problem with the digital RSVP tracker I had set up for them. Just another task for the family's resident fixer. I was used to it. I picked up the phone, ready to solve another problem. But when I read the words, the air went out of my lungs. It wasn't a question. It was a dismissal, an execution, delivered with the casual indifference of someone ordering a pizza. The message read, "Hey Nate, sorry for the late notice, but we've had to make some tough cuts to the guest list. It's gotten way bigger than we planned. We're gonna have to take you and a +1 off the list. Hope you understand. We'll celebrate with you another time." I read it, and my brain simply refused to process it. The words floated there, nonsensical. Take you off the list. It felt like a line from a movie, not a text from my only brother. The brother whose science fair projects I built, whose college application essays I edited, whose first car I co-signed for. My first coherent thought was that it had to be a prank. A sick, twisted joke, even for Alex. I stared at his name, waiting for the follow-up text, the "just kidding man." That would make everything right again. But the screen remained dark. The silence stretched. The cold certainty began to seep into my bones. This was real. My fingers felt clumsy as I dialed my mother's number. She was the family mediator, the one who interpreted Alex's brand of chaos for the rest of the world. She would fix this. She had to. She answered with a cheerful, "Nathan, honey, is everything okay?" My voice came out strained, tight. "Mom, I just got a text from Alex. About the wedding." There was a pause, and then a sigh. It wasn't a gasp of maternal horror. It wasn't outrage. It was a long, weary sigh of inconvenience. The sound you make when you're asked to deal with something tedious. That sigh told me everything I needed to know. She already knew. "Oh, that," she said, her tone suddenly flat, dismissive. "Yes, he mentioned it might be a possibility. Listen, Nathan, I need you to be the bigger person here." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. The bigger person? Mom, he uninvited me. From his own wedding. There are 150 other people on that list. It's just a wedding. Stop being so dramatic, she snapped, and there it was. The phrase that would become the title of my new life. Brianna's family is very large, and the venue has strict limits. It's about logistics, honey. It's not personal. You, of all people, should understand numbers. Not personal. I leaned back heavily in my chair, the sleek metal of my phone suddenly feeling slick and foreign in my hand. My gaze fell on an intricate architectural diagram framed on my wall. A system I had designed, the very heart of the company Alex now claimed as his kingdom. Then my eyes flickered to the small, worn photograph on the corner of my desk. 2 boys in a backyard, grinning. The older one's arms slung protectively over the younger's shoulders. We looked like strangers from a forgotten country. There was nothing left to say. The argument was over before it began. "Okay, Mom," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. I ended the call. The silence that rushed in was absolute. And in that profound quiet, 40 years of being the reliable son, the the supportive brother, the family's silent, uncredited engine, all came to a screeching, shuddering halt. I didn't just feel hurt. I felt erased. The first person I called was David. I had to. If I didn't talk to someone who knew the truth, I felt like I might actually lose my mind. David and I have been friends since our freshman year of college. He's a sharp, no-nonsense corporate lawyer, and more importantly, he's the only person who has had a front-row seat to the long, slow train wreck of my family dynamics. He's the keeper of my sanity. "Let me get this straight," he said, his voice dangerously calm after I'd relayed the text and the soul-crushing conversation with my mom. "The golden boy, who is the CEO of a company that exists only because you built it, has uninvited you from his wedding to make room for one of Brianna's third cousins. And your mother's response was to tell you to stop being dramatic? That's the summary, yeah?" I said, my voice hollow. "Unbelievable," he breathed. It wasn't shock. It was confirmation. "This is the culmination of everything, Nate. It's the Apollo project. It's the Vegas incident. It's every damn holiday dinner. All rolled into one pathetic text message. The Apollo project." Just hearing the name made a muscle in my jaw clench. That was the internal name for the most grueling project of my career. It was about 3 years ago. Innovatech was on the verge of losing its biggest client, a massive logistics firm. Our legacy platform was buckling under their data load, and they'd given us a 6-month ultimatum. Fix it or they walk. And if they walked, half our revenue would walk with them. At the time, Alex was the VP of sales, a role he was perfect for. He could sell ice to a polar bear. I was the chief technology officer, a title that sounded important but, in my family's eyes, just meant I was the head nerd. The task of the rebuild fell entirely on my team and me. For 6 solid weeks, my life consisted of my office, my keyboard, and a rotating cast of takeout containers. I remember the smell of the server room at 3 a.m., a mixture of hot electronics and stale coffee. I remember rewriting 500,000 lines of code until my vision blurred. I remember the sheer, bone-deep exhaustion. My team was incredible, but I was the architect, the one holding the entire, fragile structure together in my head. We did it. We launched the new platform a week ahead of schedule. It was a masterpiece of efficiency and stability. It didn't just save the client. It became our new flagship product, the thing that propelled Innovatech to the next level. The day we presented the results to the board of directors, I was so tired I could barely see straight. I took a seat in the back of the conference room as usual. Alex was at the podium. He was electric. He spoke with passion and conviction about his vision for the company, about the bold new direction he was taking us in. He used phrases like, "When I architected this new platform," and "the strategy one implemented." He presented my team's work, my sleepless nights, my intellectual property, as his own personal triumph. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. My father, who was still on the board back then, was the first one on his feet, his face beaming with a pride I had never seen him direct at me. He glanced my way, gave me a brief, almost pitying nod, a pat on the head for the good little mechanic who'd kept the engine running, and then immediately turned back to Alex, his golden son, the conquering hero. Alex was promoted to COO the following month. I got a company-wide email thanking the tech teams for their hard work. "I remember," I told David, the words feeling like gravel in my mouth. "I remember Dad taking him to that fancy steakhouse downtown to celebrate. He told me later that I needed to develop more executive presence, like my brother." Executive presence? You know what that is, right? It's the ability to confidently take credit for other people's work, David said, his voice laced with acid. "And don't forget the Vegas trip. That was a masterclass in family dysfunction." I shuddered. Alex's 30th birthday. He and his finance bro friends had decided to celebrate in Las Vegas. Alex, ever the showman, tried to play the part of a high roller. He wasn't just playing cards. He got involved in some high-risk, off-the-books investment with some characters he'd met at a bar. It blew up in his face spectacularly. He didn't just lose his money. He ended up owing $50,000 to a group of people who don't send polite reminder notices. The call didn't come from Alex. Of course not. He was too cowardly. came from my mother at 2 in the morning. She was hysterical, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "You have to help him, Nathan," she cried. "They said they know where we live. They're going to hurt him. You're the only one who can fix this." The fixer. That was my role. It was a reflex. I didn't even think about it. The next morning, I went to my bank. I sold off a substantial block of the tech stocks I'd bought in my early 20s, the nest egg that had provided the seed capital to start Innovatech in the first place. By noon, $50,000 was wired to an anonymous account, and the problem was gone. A week later, we had one of those excruciatingly quiet family dinners. Alex sat there, looking sullen and chastised. But my parents' simmering anger wasn't for him. It was incomprehensibly for me. "You're his older brother, Nathan," my father had said, his voice thick with disappointment. "You have to be a better role model. You know he can be impulsive. Why weren't you looking out for him?" I stared at him, dumbfounded. Looking out for him? I was 1,000 miles away. "I'm not his keeper." My mother jumped in, her eyes welling up with practiced tears. "Don't use that tone with your father. Alex looks up to you. When you're not there to guide him, he makes mistakes. This is just as much your responsibility as it is his." I looked across the table at Alex, pleading with my eyes for him to say something. Anything. To step in and take an ounce of accountability. He just poked at his mashed potatoes and mumbled, "They're right, man. I got in over my head. You probably should have warned me about guys like that." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it still left me speechless. "They've been gaslighting you for your entire life." David's voice cut through the bitter memory. "They've built Alex's entire identity on top of your achievements and your bank account. They've treated you like a utility, a resource to be tapped whenever they need something. And now that they're planning the biggest party of their lives, they've decided the plumbing can be hidden in the basement." I swiveled in my chair, turning away from the memories. I needed to ground myself in the present. I opened my laptop. On the screen was the website for a 5-star resort in the Caribbean. A page I'd been looking at wistfully just a few days earlier, dreaming of a break from the burnout. An idea began to crystallize in my mind. It wasn't an angry, vengeful idea. It was colder, more precise. It was the logical conclusion to a lifetime of flawed data. The family system was corrupt. It was time for a hard reboot. "No," I said to David, my voice clear and steady in a way it hadn't been just an hour before. "No, I'm not going to let them get away with it. Not this time." I clicked on the Book Now button. First class. Oceanfront suite with a private pool. The works. My fingers flew across the keyboard, entering my credit card information without a tremor. "David?" I said, a strange, unfamiliar feeling blooming in my chest. It might have been rage, or maybe it was just relief. As a majority shareholder and a member of the board at Innovatech, what exactly can they not do without my signature? There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then, a low, slow whistle. "Oh man," he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Practically everything that matters. Major acquisitions, significant capital expenditures, changes to executive compensation. Why do you ask?" I looked at the booking confirmation on my screen. My flight was on Thursday, the day of the rehearsal dinner. "No reason," I said. "I'm just thinking it's time I took a vacation. A long one." Making that decision felt like flipping a switch in a dark room. Suddenly, everything was illuminated. The patterns of behavior, the years of subtle manipulation, the quiet erosion of my own self-worth. I saw it all with a blinding, painful clarity. For my entire life, I had been playing a game where the rules were rigged against me. Now I was finally walking off the field. The first move was the trip itself. This wasn't going to be a quiet retreat. This was a declaration of independence. I called the luxury travel agency and got a consultant named Sarah on the line. "I need a trip, Sarah," I said. "Next level. A place where my phone service might be a little spotty." She laughed. "I think I know just the thing, Mr. Evans. Are we celebrating something?" "A retirement," I said. "From a long, unpaid job." She didn't miss a beat. Within an hour, She had curated an itinerary that was so over the top it was almost comical. The lay-flat bed on the plane, the personal escort through customs, the private villa at the resort that had its own butler. It was a level of indulgence I had never allowed myself. I had the money, of course. I'd been the financial bedrock of my family for years, quietly accumulating wealth from the company I'd built, while Alex played the part of the big-shot CEO. But I had always lived modestly, almost guiltily, as if I didn't deserve it. As I confirmed the booking, paying with a credit card Alex didn't even know existed, I felt a surge of power that was completely new to me. It wasn't about the money. It was about the choice. For the first time, I was choosing myself. The second move was the announcement. A quiet disappearance wouldn't do. They needed to see. They needed to understand that the fixture they had taken for granted had just been ripped out of the wall. I waited until I was settled in the airport's first-class lounge, a serene oasis of calm and polished chrome. I ordered a glass of champagne that cost more than a bottle of anything my father would ever buy. I arranged the scene carefully. The bubbling glass, my leather travel bag, the plane waiting on the tarmac outside the window. It was the kind of self-satisfied, obnoxious photo my brother Alex specialized in. The caption was a work of art, if I did say so myself. Simple, cutting. Sometimes, when one door closes, a private airport lounge opens. Headed somewhere warm to get over the drama. Guess I'll survive being cut from the guest list. I hit post, and I waited. The response was faster than I could have imagined. My phone, sitting face down on the table, began to vibrate. A low, angry buzz. Then another. It was a swarm of digital hornets, and I had just kicked the nest. I ignored it, taking a slow, deliberate sip of champagne. Tasted like rebellion. The first direct hit came, predictably, through my mother. She forwarded a text from my Aunt Carol, the family's Surgeon General of passive aggression. Carol's text read, "Eleanor, darling, I just saw Nathan's shocking post. Is he all right? He seems to be having a very public and frankly embarrassing breakdown over this wedding. It reflects so poorly on all of you. I'm praying for his stability." My mother's only addition was a dagger. "Are you happy now, Nathan?" I stared at the words. Embarrassing for the family. That was the charge. Reflects poorly on you. That was the sentence. For decades, that accusation had been enough to bring me to heel. The fear of causing a scene, of upsetting the delicate, artificial balance of our family, had been my cage. But looking at it now, from the comfort of this leather chair, I felt nothing but a cold, liberating indifference. I wasn't embarrassing them. I was exposing them. The next shot came from the bride herself. A direct message from Brianna. "Wow. Real mature, Nathan. I guess we see who the real drama queen is. Have a nice life on your little tantrum trip." I had to laugh. This was a woman whose wedding registry included a $5,000 espresso machine and a request for cash gifts to fund a 6-week honeymoon in Bali. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. But the message that truly set the stage for the coming war was an email from Alex. The subject line was just my name, a sign of his imperial displeasure. The tone was not of a brother, but of a boss scolding an unruly subordinate. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Take that post down. Now, you're making a scene and Mom is a wreck. I've been trying to reach you all day. I sent you an email yesterday. I need your signature on the authorization for the Partner X acquisition. The deadline is tomorrow at 5 p.m. Stop acting like a child and call me so we can handle this." The Partner X acquisition. The crown jewel of his imaginary empire. It was an aggressive, high-risk takeover of a smaller competitor. I had analyzed the deal. It was a vanity project, pure and simple, and it had a very real chance of bankrupting the company if the market shifted even slightly. My approval, as the majority shareholder, was legally required for any expenditure of this magnitude. Alex knew this, but he saw my signature as a mere formality. He saw me as an extension of his will, an assumption he was about to regret. I archived his email and took another sip of champagne. Just as they announced boarding, one more call came through. A number I would never block. My grandmother, June. "Nathan." Her voice was thin, but clear as a bell. "I saw your photograph. It's about time. Tears pricked my eyes. You think so, Grandma? I know so, she said, her voice fierce. I told your mother. I said, Eleanor, you push that boy out, you're pushing out the foundation of this house. It will collapse. She thinks charm and good looks can pay the mortgage. She's about to get a hard lesson in reality. She paused. They've forgotten who you are, Nathan. Maybe it's time you reminded them. I think you're right, I whispered. Be safe, she said. But for God's sake, don't you dare back down. Not this time. I promise, I said. I won't. Walking down the jet bridge felt surreal. Every instinct, every fiber of my being, screamed at me to turn back. The good son, the dutiful brother, the family fixer. That man was having a panic attack, begging me to go make peace. The weight of 40 years of conditioning was immense. I could almost feel my mother's disappointment, my father's stony silence. But then I heard my grandmother's voice in my head. Don't you dare back down. I found my seat, a spacious pot of privacy and comfort. I sank into the leather, the smell of which was the smell of a life I had earned but never allowed myself to live. The flight attendant approached. Pre-departure champagne, sir? Yes, I said, my voice steady. Thank you. I took out my phone. The screen was a nightmare of missed calls and angry red notification bubbles. My thumb hovered over my father's name. I could end this right now. I could call, apologize, and promise to sign the papers. I could restore the peace. With a deep breath, I pressed and held the side button. The screen went black. I turned the phone completely off. As the engine spooled up and the plane hurtled down the runway, pressing me back into my seat, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt since I was a child. I wasn't running away from my family. I was flying towards myself. When I landed in paradise a few hours later, the warm, humid air felt like a benediction. I checked into the villa, walked out onto the private terrace overlooking the endless blue ocean, and sent a single text to David. Landed. The game has begun. The next 48 hours were an exercise in radical self-care. Felt foreign, illicit, like I was breaking a sacred rule. The rule was, Nathan is always on call. Nathan is always available. Nathan's time is not his own. I broke that rule with glorious impunity. I left my phone in a drawer in the villa for most of the day. I discovered the simple, profound pleasure of walking into the ocean until the water was up to my chest and just floating. I let the sun warm my face and the salt water hold me. I didn't think about code or deadlines or my family's bottomless well of needs. I thought about nothing at all. I had conversations with strangers. A couple from Chicago, celebrating their 20th anniversary, told me about their kids and their business selling custom furniture. I told them I was a software architect on a much-needed sabbatical. We talked for an hour. It was easy, normal. There was no subtext, no hidden agenda, no history of resentment simmering beneath the surface. It was just human connection. I realized how little of that I had in my life. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up with the sun. I felt a strange absence of anxiety. There was no knot in my stomach. I made coffee in the villa and sat on my terrace, watching the fishing boats glide across the bay. It was Saturday. Back home, my family would be in a frenzy of hair appointments, tuxedo fittings, and last-minute flower arrangements. The thought drifted through my mind like a cloud and then disappeared. It had nothing to do with me. Around noon, I decided it was time. I went down to the main infinity pool, a spectacular expanse of blue that seemed to melt into the sea. I found a lounge chair under a palm tree, ordered a cocktail that came in a hollowed-out pineapple, and took out my phone. It was time for my second transmission from the new world. I took a picture, my perspective, my feet propped up on the edge of the lounge chair, slightly out of focus. The main subject was the stunning view, the sparkling pool, the palm trees, the turquoise ocean stretching to the horizon. It was a picture of pure, unapologetic tranquility. The caption was a direct quote from my mother, a quiet little knife twist. "Stop being so dramatic," they said. So I did. I hit post, put the phone back in my bag without checking for reactions, and slid into the cool, welcoming water of the pool. I floated on my back, looking up at the vast blue sky, and I felt a sense of peace that was so profound it was almost frightening. Meanwhile, 2,000 miles north, the pressure was reaching critical levels. I didn't know the details then, of course. I pieced it all together later from various sources. The wedding day had dawned not with joy, but with a frantic, buzzing energy. Alex was a ghost at his own celebration. He wasn't mingling. He was hiding in corners, glued to his phone, his face pale and slick with sweat. He was alternating between trying my number and trying to placate the representatives from Partner X, who were demanding to know why the signed deal hadn't been transmitted. My father, bless his oblivious heart, was playing the role of the proud patriarch, slapping Alex on the back and booming about his pre-wedding jitters. My mother was a whirlwind of frantic energy, a smiling, brittle hostess policing everyone's emotions, insisting on how perfect and wonderful everything was. She was trying to build a fortress of denial against the coming reality. The reality was that Alex hadn't just counted on my signature. He had leveraged it. He had assured Partner X that the deal was done, that my approval was a rubber stamp. He had made promises to the investors at Mr. Thompson's fund based on the projected revenue from this acquisition. He had, in essence, built a massive financial structure on a foundation that he didn't own and had just kicked out. I remained blissfully unaware of the specifics. The only intrusion was a single, discreet text from David that I saw when I briefly checked my phone for messages from my grandmother. FYI, Thompson's legal team has been in touch. They are formally invoking a review clause in their investment agreement due to potential misrepresentation by the CEO. The word fraud was used. This is escalating faster than I thought. Your timing was impeccable. I read the message, a slow smile spreading across my face. Fraud. Powerful word. I looked around me. The sun was warm. The drink was cold. The sound of the ocean was a gentle rhythm. I was no longer just the angry brother who'd been snubbed. I was the silent, absent center of a collapsing star. My power wasn't in my presence. It was in my absence. It wasn't in what I did. It was in what I refused to do. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. I pictured them all gathering, the guests in their pastel suits and floral dresses, my family standing at the front, smiling their perfect, false smiles. I pictured the beautiful, expensive archway of flowers they would stand under. And I pictured the giant sinkhole of Alex's lies, invisible but undeniable, opening up right beneath their feet. The thought didn't make me happy. It made me feel vindicated. It was the universe balancing its books. It was karma served cold with a little paper umbrella. I finished my pineapple cocktail, stood up, and decided to go for a long walk down the beach. The wedding was about to start. I had absolutely nowhere else to be. The assault began at 6:32 p.m. local time. I was back in the serene, air-conditioned quiet of my villa. I had just showered off the salt and sand from my walk on the beach. I was dressed for dinner, feeling a calm I hadn't known in years, and was about to head to the resort's acclaimed seafood restaurant. That's when the phone, which I had carelessly left on the nightstand, lit up like a fire alarm. It was my mother. I watched the screen, her smiling picture from last year's family holiday photo, and I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A second later, it rang again. My father. I pressed the red decline button. Then the text started. A frantic, staccato burst of desperation. Mom. Nathaniel, pick up this phone right now. This is a family emergency. She only ever used my full name when she was furious. Dad. Son, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's over. Call us. Now. Alex. Where are you? You ruined everything. Brianna left me. She's gone. You did this. I sank onto the edge of the king-sized bed, staring at that last text from Alex. Brianna left me. The first domino had officially fallen. And the final 3 words, you did this. Of course. The family mantra. When the golden boy fails, blame the fixer for not fixing it hard enough. The old Nathan, the conditioned one, felt a jolt of adrenaline, a surge of the fixer's instinct. What happened? How did she leave? At the altar? Is Mom okay? What can I do to help? The questions flooded my brain, a programmed response to their distress. But another voice, a newer, colder, and much stronger one, rose to meet it. This is not your fire. They lit it. Let them burn. I could have turned off the phone. I could have thrown it off the balcony and into the lush jungle below. I could have proceeded to my dinner reservation and let them implode in private. But that felt incomplete. It felt like walking away from a crime scene without giving a witness statement. They needed to see me, and they needed to understand the true layout of the room they had been living in for their entire lives. I was going to answer their call, but it would be a call of my own design. I sent a calm, measured text to David. It's go time. Alex says Brianna left him. They're blaming me. I'm ready to make my statement. David's reply was instant. I've been waiting. What's the play? Get Mr. Thompson on a secure video line in 15 minutes. I texted back. Tell him it's an emergency board matter regarding the immediate solvency and leadership of Innovatech. Send the conference link to my parents and to Alex. Inform them it is their one and only opportunity to speak with me. Consider it done, David replied. Checkmate. 15 minutes later, I was seated at the elegant teak table on my private terrace. My laptop was open. A glass of iced mineral water sat beside it, condensation trickling down the side. In my video preview window, I looked calm, composed. Behind me, the sun was a molten ball of orange, sinking into a purple and gold sea. It was a backdrop of infuriating tranquility. I clicked Join Meeting. My face appeared, then David's, looking grim and focused. A moment later, a third window opened. Mr. Thompson, the head of the venture capital fund. He was in a leather chair in his wood-paneled study, looking every bit the powerful, impatient investor. His expression was thunderous. Then the final window flickered to life. It was a chaotic, shaky video feed from a phone. My mother's face filled the screen, her makeup smeared with tears, her expression wild. My father stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his face a mask of rage and utter confusion. And slumped in a chair beside them was Alex, a ghost in a wrinkled tuxedo, his tie ripped loose. They were crammed into a soulless hotel room, the debris of a collapsed wedding. A stray champagne flute, a discarded corsage, visible in the background. Nathan, my mother wailed, her voice a raw shriek. Thank God. You have to come home. You have to fix this. Brianna, she found out about the money for the Partner X deal. She said Alex lied to her. She called him a fraud. In front of her parents. She walked out of the reception. It's a catastrophe. She ruined everything. Alex mumbled, his voice a hoarse croak. She was supposed to love me. My father's voice finally erupted, a roar of impotent fury. This is your fault, Nathan. All of it. This ridiculous, selfish little vacation. If you had just signed the papers like a normal person, none of this would have happened. You humiliated your brother. You humiliated this family. I let the accusations hang in the humid night air. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. I let the silence stretch, amplifying their chaos. Then I leaned forward. I believe, I said, my voice perfectly level, a chilling counterpoint to their hysteria, that you are all operating under a severe and long-standing misapprehension about the company and about me. Mr. Thompson chose that moment to intervene. He cleared his throat, a sound as sharp and commanding as a gavel. Their frantic attention snapped to his window on the screen. Perhaps I can provide some clarity, Thompson said, his tone icy and professional. Alex, in our last conversation, you assured my fund that the board's approval for the Partner X acquisition was a done deal. You failed to mention that you do not control the board. You also failed to mention that the company's bylaws, which I have reviewed this afternoon, require the explicit, signed consent of the majority shareholder for any capital expenditure over $1 million. My father puffed out his chest. I'm on the board. I approved it. Thompson afforded him a smile so thin it was barely a facial expression. Richard, your 10% stake is noted. It does not, however, constitute a majority. Nathan Evans holds 65% of the voting shares of Innovatech. Shares he has held since he founded the company in his garage 10 years ago. Mr. Evans, he said, nodding almost imperceptibly at my window. Is the board? The silence that followed was absolute. It was a digital void. I watched the truth land, watched it detonate behind their eyes. My father's face went slack, the color draining from it. My mother's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, darted between Thompson's window and mine. Alex just stared, his face crumbling as the lie that had propped up his entire adult life was systematically dismantled by the one man whose authority he couldn't deny. No, my mother finally whispered, shaking her head. No, that's not right. Nathan, tell them it's a lie. You work for your brother. And in that moment of complete desperation, the final, ugly, foundational truth of our family spilled out. He doesn't deserve it, she suddenly screamed, her voice cracking into a raw, ragged shriek. She was pointing a shaking finger at my image, her carefully maintained composure utterly shattered. It was supposed to be Alex's turn. Everything was always so easy for you. Your brains, your computers, your quiet success. You never needed me. Not really. Alex needed me. He needed the company, the success. He deserved to be the important one. There it was. The confession I never knew I was waiting for. They didn't ignore my success. They resented it. They hadn't overlooked me. They had actively held me down to elevate him. They hadn't propped Alex up because they thought he was strong. They did it because he was weak, because he was malleable, because he needed them, and my quiet self-sufficiency had been a silent, daily judgment on them all. I looked at the weeping, hysterical woman on the screen who was my mother, and the profound, decades-long ache in my chest finally dissolved. It was replaced by a calm, cold certainty. I leaned closer to my laptop's camera. Mr. Thompson, I said, my voice clear and unwavering. Please schedule an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. Monday. The first item of business will be a vote on the immediate termination of Alexander Evans's employment for gross mismanagement and potential fraud. Alex made a sound like a wounded animal. My father looked like he had been turned to stone. And Mom, I said, looking directly into her wild, uncomprehending eyes. I truly hope he was worth it. I moved my cursor and clicked, Leave meeting. The screen went blank, plunging their chaotic, shattered world back into darkness. My own world, under the stars of a Caribbean sky, was finally, blessedly, quiet. The silence that descended after I ended the call was the most profound quiet I have ever experienced. It was more than the absence of their shouting. It was the absence of their weight. For 42 years, I had carried the burden of their expectations, their drama, their needs, and now it was gone. The only sound was the gentle shushing of the waves on the shore, a rhythm that felt like the world breathing a sigh of relief with me. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel a rush of vengeful glee. I felt a strange, hollowed-out sense of peace. The diagnosis was complete. The disease had been identified. The tumor of their lies and my enabling had been exposed. Now it was time for the surgery. I sat there for a long time, just watching the last sliver of the sun disappear below the horizon. Then, I turned back to my laptop. It was time for the final, necessary act of excision. My fingers moved over the keyboard, not with anger, but with a surgeon's precision. The email was short, formal, and brutal. It was a document of pure consequence. To Eleanor Evans, Richard Evans, Alex Evans from Nathan Evans. Subject: Final notice and termination of relationship. Body: This email will serve as my final and legally binding communication with you. As stated in our call, an emergency meeting of the Innovatech Board of Directors has been scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The sole agenda item will be the vote on the termination of Alexander Evans's employment, effective immediately, for reasons including gross mismanagement, fiduciary negligence, and potential fraudulent misrepresentation to our investors. Furthermore, effective by end of business day tomorrow, Sunday, all access to any financial accounts, credit lines, club memberships, or other assets linked to my name or my personal financial portfolio will be permanently revoked. This includes the supplementary cards held by Eleanor and Richard Evans. Please make your personal arrangements accordingly, as any attempted use of these assets after that time will be declined and flagged. This is not a negotiation. There will be no further discussion. Do not attempt to contact me, my legal counsel, or any employee of Innovatech through any means. All future communications will be treated as harassment. Nathan. I read it over once. It was the coldest thing I had ever written. Felt like it was written by a stranger. But I knew that stranger was the man I had to become to protect the man I was. I attached one file to the email. A crisp, legally airtight resignation and severance document that David's firm had drafted for me earlier in the week. It left no room for argument. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. This was setting fire to the bridge, the ships, and the entire harbor. I took one last deep breath of the warm, salt-tinged air, and I clicked it. The email was gone. The next step was the digital amputation. I picked up my phone, the source of so much of my recent misery. I went to my contacts list. I found Mom. I looked at her smiling photo, a picture taken at last year's Thanksgiving, a day I had spent half of in the kitchen fixing her laptop. I tapped, block this caller. A confirmation screen popped up. Are you sure? Yes, I was sure. I confirmed. Her contact was gone. I did the same for my father. Blocked. The same for Alex. Blocked. The same for Aunt Carol and a half-dozen other cousins and family friends who I knew were part of their network of gossip and manipulation. Snip, snip, snip. Each block was a small, quiet, violent act. It was self-inflicted surgery without anesthesia. A profound sense of loss washed over me. A grief for the family I wished I had. The family I had pretended to have for so long. But underneath the grief was a foundation of solid relief. The bleeding had stopped. The wound could finally begin to heal. That night, I canceled my reservation at the fancy restaurant. The idea of a multi-course meal felt absurd. I ordered a simple club sandwich and a beer from room service. I ate it alone on the terrace, under a canopy of stars so bright they looked fake. There was no elation, no fist-pumping moment of victory. There was just the quiet, somber finality of a long war finally being over. The book of my old life was closed. The next morning, I called the front desk. "Hi," I said. "This is Nathan Evans in Villa 7. I'd like to extend my stay. For another week. I needed the time. I needed the silence. I needed to sit with the ghost of the man I used to be and get to know the man who was left. He was a stranger, and I had a feeling it was going to take a long time to learn his language. 6 months later, the world looked and felt entirely different. The view from my office was no longer a quiet, tree-lined street in the suburbs. I had moved Innovatech's headquarters from the sleepy tech park Alex had chosen to a gleaming glass tower in the heart of the city. My new office was a corner suite on the 45th floor. The glass walls offered a panoramic, 180-degree view of the sprawling metropolis below. There was nowhere to hide. It was an office built for a leader, not a recluse. The transition had been a brutal, exhilarating, and deeply clarifying process. The emergency board meeting had been exactly the clean cut I needed. Alex didn't even show up. My father attended, looking 10 years older. He attempted a blustering, emotional appeal about family and forgiveness, but it fell flat in the cold, corporate air of the boardroom. When Mr. Thompson presented a preliminary report from the forensic accountants, detailing Alex's use of company funds for personal travel, luxury car leases, and even a down payment on the house he shared with Brianna, my father deflated. He abstained from the vote to terminate his own son. It was the last act of a coward. He submitted his own resignation from the board via email the next day. I stepped in as interim CEO, a role I never wanted but immediately knew I was suited for. My first 2 weeks were pure damage control. I had to personally call our top 10 clients to reassure them. I had to hold an all-hands meeting to calm the fears of our employees, many of whom were brilliant engineers who had been demoralized by Alex's chaotic, Promise everything, deliver nothing style of management. The deeper I dug, the worse the mess became. Alex hadn't just been a bad CEO, he'd been a destructive one. He had neglected key client relationships, ignored critical infrastructure updates, and promoted his cronies into positions they were laughably unqualified for. One afternoon, I discovered he had nearly lost our second-largest account, a major healthcare provider, because he had missed 3 consecutive quarterly review meetings. He'd told them he was visiting international partners, when his credit card statements showed he was actually at a golf resort in Scottsdale. I booked a flight to Philadelphia the next day. I walked into that healthcare provider's headquarters alone. I sat down with their executive team, apologized profusely for our lack of communication, and then spent the next 3 hours not selling, but listening. I then walked them through a new, detailed roadmap for their specific needs, a plan I had drawn up on the flight over. I didn't make promises. I showed them solutions. By the time I left, the relationship wasn't just saved. It was stronger than ever. With every problem I solved, with every broken system I redesigned, I felt myself becoming more solid. This was my native language, identifying chaos and creating order. Only this time, I wasn't doing it in the shadows to make someone else look good. I was doing it for the company I had built, for the employees who depended on it, and for myself. Today was a milestone. Today, I was officially handing over the reins. Your 30-60-90-day plan is one of the most impressive I've ever seen, I said, sliding the document across the polished boardroom table. It's aggressive, but it's smart. It's focused on product and people. Across from me, Catherine Miles, a sharp, experienced executive in her 50s, gave a confident smile. It's the only way to build lasting value. Nathan, you've stabilized the ship. My job is to set the course for a new destination. We had been interviewing candidates for weeks. Catherine was the clear choice from her first interview. She was everything Alex wasn't. Experienced, detail-oriented, transparent, and utterly allergic to bullshit. The job is yours, Catherine, I said, extending a hand. Welcome to Innovatech. I look forward to working with you as chairman. As we shook hands, a profound sense of relief washed over me. I had proven I could lead, but I knew my true passion lay in creation. Now I could finally return to it. I had maintained my vow of no contact. My family's numbers remained blocked. The only news I got came in small, carefully curated doses from my grandmother, June. I visited her every Sunday. We would sit in her garden, drink iced tea, and talk about everything except the one thing that hung between us. We didn't need to. The peace we shared was its own language. She told me my parents had sold the large family home and moved into a much smaller condo. She told me Alex was selling luxury cars at a dealership in the next town over. Fitting irony. Brianna had divorced him swiftly and quietly. My grandmother was the only piece of my old life that I had intentionally carried into the new one. One Sunday, as I was helping her prune her roses, she paused and looked at me, her eyes clear and perceptive. "You're smiling more," she said. It wasn't a question. "I have more to smile about," I answered honestly. "Good," she said, snipping a dead bloom from a bush. "That's all that matters." My new life wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. It was a structure I had built myself on a foundation of hard-won truth. The architecture was sound. It was built to last. It's strange how you can spend a lifetime chasing something, only to realize it wasn't what you wanted at all. For years, I thought I wanted my family's approval. I thought I wanted their recognition. I contorted myself into knots trying to earn it, sacrificing my time, my money, and my own sense of self in the process. The truth is, I didn't need their approval. I needed my own. The peace I found wasn't in that 5-star Caribbean resort. That was just a catalyst, a clean room where I could finally perform the necessary surgery. The real peace, I discovered, is much quieter. It's the feeling I get on a normal Tuesday afternoon, walking away from my office building, my mind clear and focused not on someone else's crisis, but on my own creative challenges. My life now is defined by a quiet, steady rhythm. Catherine is a phenomenal CEO, steering the company with a firm and expert hand. I've transitioned back to my true love, my role as chief architect. I lead a small, elite team of engineers, and we spend our days in front of whiteboards, dreaming up the future. We are building things that have never been built before. The noise of my old life has been replaced by the hum of productive creation. I don't wait for the buzz of my phone with a sense of dread anymore. The space in my brain that used to be reserved for my family's next emergency is now occupied by complex algorithms and bold new ideas. It's a profound, liberating trade. Occasionally, I think of them, of my parents, of Alex. The sharp edges of anger and betrayal have worn away, leaving behind a kind of distant, detached sadness. I see them as characters in a story that is no longer mine, trapped in a loop of their own making. I genuinely hope they find some kind of peace, but I know now that their journey has nothing to do with me. Mine is on a different road entirely. This morning, I was grabbing a coffee from the small cafe near my apartment. The air was cool, the city was waking up. It was a perfectly ordinary moment. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For a microsecond, a phantom limb of the old anxiety twitched. Then it was gone as quickly as it came. I pulled out my phone. It was a message from Catherine. Took a look at the initial specs for Project Nova. It's not just an improvement. It's a paradigm shift. How do you do it? A wide, genuine smile spread across my face. It wasn't a smile of vindication. It wasn't the smirk of a man who had won a war. It was the simple, unadulterated joy of being seen and valued for who you truly are by people who operate in the same reality you do. I texted her back. Lots of coffee. The real work starts now. Let's get it. I put the phone away and stepped out into the morning sun. The road ahead was wide open, stretching out before me. I didn't know exactly where it was going, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking in the rearview mirror. I was looking forward. And I was the one behind the wheel. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a hard choice to reclaim your own life and your own peace? It's a tough road, but you're not alone. Share your story in the comments below,